Hi, my name is Benedict for Higher Hertz. This is the second in a couple that I've promised, or we have promised for psychic modulation around their Melt series. The first one was Mondo Melt, which is kind of the cut down of all the melty stuff because it provides a good basis, and the other stuff that we look at is based on extrapolations of that. In this case, it's Echo Melt, which has more of the melty stuff than Mondo alone, plus it's got this whole echo section, so a delay attached to that. I'm not going to go over all the details simply because I covered most of that in the Mondo Melt already. This is pitched as being that combo of retro wavy VHS tape, what have you, lo-fi-ness, that is coupled to a delay that's dubby. Messed up, yes. Dubby, well, it depends how you want to define dubby. To me, dub was the obvious stuff coming out of the sort of Caribbean kind of thing, and then obviously very much into the sound systems like Tackhead. So where there was lots of tape stuff and playing around with echoes and stuff like that. But dub is a chopped up form, and a lot of what drove early remix culture. So through the particularly into the mid 80s, there was a lot of remixing, and that was actually derived from dub, where they were taking things and cutting them up. So in terms of the echo, while I'm not 100% sold on it as dub from a purist point of view, it definitely is based around that idea of these echoes that are rhythmic and, well, kind of chewed up. But it does it in a way that's unique, which is going to be a selling feature or a total off-put. I figured I was going to write a piece with this guy to put it straight into battle, to see how I felt, because anyone who follows me knows that I love echoes, but I'm pretty fussy about the ones that are really special to me. And if they don't provide something special, they just don't get house room, because I've got things that I adore. So here is some sections of the piece. We'll start with unaffected and then affected. Now, the only difference between these pieces is that in the unaffected, I've simply turned all the echo melts off, rendered off, same mastering, same EQ, same everything. But the only effect that runs on pretty well everything in here is echo melt. So it's just purely the difference between if this is in or this is out across the whole piece, and I did bring the whole piece up to level, so they're vaguely similar in level. Obviously, the impact's going to be quite different. With that, rather dry and straight. Rich and wide and deep. There's a lot of messed upness going on in here, but you can hear that I'm really using it in the way that it's designed to be used in terms of providing something really interesting. Next sound. I deliberately wanted the piece to feel like it breaks apart, like it melts. So I'm using features of echo melt to accentuate this feeling of melting, which doesn't really happen when the device is not there. So I'm merely playing to echo melt to give us that feeling. What we have, just looking into the piece fairly briefly, is echo melt on everything. So if we have, let's just drums, which are a relatively simple drum loop from, I don't know, some say classic 80s drum machine samples, stuff that's in Reason, and then it is actually bounced down to audio and then stretched and stretched and stretched a few times, hence it being rather tortured already. And then add this extra, and it gets very interesting. Bass is very loud. This is controlling levels to some extent. I deliberately didn't want that bass sound to end up too chewed up, but I did want it to have that nice bounce. That's a dub thing, to have a really nice bounce. So this does that really well. From memory, yes, it's phase modulation, so Casio style PD, which is not exactly a mobile form of sound. I love it, but this gives it that real mobile sort of feel. Pad. It's got quite a bit going on in it. It's grain, which is actually the drum loop, and a pad inside it. So it adds a lot more movement and richness and smooths that sound off quite a lot. What's JP45 doing? Okay, so the pad is across a couple of instruments. They play against each other, so no line on its own makes much sense. That sort of Jupiter 4-y kind of sound. So just nice chorusing, richness in there without too much over wonkiness. We get to this lead sound, which is pretty wonky. I deliberately started with a sound that most people were going to find very challenging, but it's melodic. It's called charmer, like a snake charmer's pipe. Then to see how this was going to make something of it that people were more sort of down with because it was chewed up. So there's quite a lot of movement going on in there. And then the brass, again, very Benedict-style synth brass. Subtractor's a wonderful synth with a great pedigree, but can seem a little rigid. So this, I wanted to make it move, and it definitely does that. So an awful lot of space going into that one. And then finally we get this string sound, which is algorithm, so it's FM. Very simple. Though anything in FM is simple, kind of string. You can hear this sort of fair amount of uncertainty in movement, so it takes it from being this very thin, somewhat almost aggressive, strident sound to still keeping that quality. Adding a lot of movement. I think there's thunder outside. So they're the elements of the piece. In dry. And wet. So all we've done again is just turned these off and on for the AB. I just rendered it down to make it easy to do. In terms of what is delivered for the piece, obviously the piece is built around it. And do I feel like I won because of it? Because I played to it? Yes, I definitely do feel like I do. But it's a strong and unique sound. So it is a little bit more of a one-trick pony than I would normally personally go for. I love delays like, well, the Echo within reason, and I make my own as well. It's a lot of specialist stuff, but they're still designed to be very general, but then have this ability to do an extra something or other. This tends to be somewhat all or nothing. So psychic modulation, we'll close this one up now. Psychic modulation are a niche player. I covered them before. They've been around for some time, but you just don't hear about them. They're not the, let's constantly talk about them like FabFilter or UAD or whatever. But I think that's actually a good thing, because if you are looking for something different, and every indie act should be looking for their own secret sauce. If this matches what you're chasing for your secret sauce, not as in like, oh, well, I'm chasing somebody else's secret sauce, then this is in many ways a hands-down winner. At $59, I think it's very fairly priced if it suits what you want. If you are looking for a generalist delay, then this one's probably going to be frustrating for you. But if you want the extra things that it does, the amount of detail and uniqueness in here, it's going to be a total winner, or not at all. If it's a total winner, then $59 I think is excellent money, especially bearing in mind that FabFilter or whatever, you're paying 100, 130, whatever. I'm not quoting a price there, but at $59 for everything that's in here, the amount of detail, if it works for you, I think pricing is very, very good. There is a manual, which I did pick on last time and will again here. We'll run over my good and bads. That is that, again, I think it sounds very good. You hear there in the piece in the AB, it goes from being sort of quite hard and dry, obviously not properly mixed because it's missing its main mix feature, which is the echoes and choruses and stuff, which put things into dip space as well as giving girth and body. But it is able to give this huge richness and washy space and vast amount of movement, whilst sounding really good, so long as you were understanding that it is very dramatic. It is very detailed. There's a huge amount of control over the wonkiness, possibly a little beyond what is entirely practical, but it's not an effect designed to be entirely practical, so we have to be fair there. And for a lot of people, this odd echo modulation could be a total winner. In terms of the downsides, it is just like Mondo Melt, incredibly easy and very quick to go from doing nothing to doing far too much. Again, wish, just like I kept saying with Mondo Melt, it'd be nice if the Mondo knob had a invert function, so rather than just multiplying everything by 10 or whatever it does, it divides everything so that you could go really quite subtle with it. Again, they'd probably go, but our audience don't want subtle, and I fully agree. But for a broader audience, somebody who's looking for a generalist delay that can then do all kinds of cool things, the ability to tone it down would be a winner. The odd echo mod, I will say I really haven't made my peace with. I have used it and used the features of it to say, okay, this is going to define this piece that sort of seems to melt. But it's odd. And unfortunately, the device is hard to understand. I really can't say I fully know how to control this, especially with regards to the echo and how the melt feature is or possibly isn't sent to the echo. It feels very unclear, and the RTFM is not helpful there at all. Maybe I haven't looked at other tutorials because this is about my feelings, not about what somebody else has done or thought. I just feel like it's going to be okay for people who just kind of do things randomly. And yes, you've got these random buttons across all the sections, which is quite cool. And the fact that they are across each individual section is kind of cool as well. It gives it a little bit more control in the randomness than Mondo Melt, so it's still good. And I must admit, quite a few of the patches within that piece were started by just pressing random, which is amusing, but it's not a way I normally work. But I chose to work with the program rather than saying this is what I'm trying to achieve. But as a regular thing, if I was working on my normal work, especially if I were mixing for a client or something like that, a nice country song, this would be... But I understand as a developer, you're sort of going, well, I'm not chasing those people. Fair enough. But yeah, it's definitely not for everybody, because this, far more than even Mondo Melt, is just... It's half a step away from Crazy Town all the time, which could make it an absolute winner for people. So looking at it with a little bit of in-depth, but not fully in-depth, because we covered all the basics of Melt in the Mondo Melt video. I shall put a picture up there. It's published already, so I know it's out there. We've got a sound here. Again, it's a phase distortion sound, so it's pretty flat deliberately. We've got our main sections. We've got our tone shaper. Basically, this is saturation and or distortion. There's an EQ. The big difference with the 3-part EQ here is that you can actually change the frequency points and their Q or width of them. And again, there's the low cut that you can bring in this plus 12, minus 12, and apparently the low cut is set, so that's a high pass filter is set at whatever frequency we set here. That seems to be what the manual says. The EQs are set kind of very much for this style of sound, but they do work nicely. And if you are finding that your sound is too... the low cut or the high pass filter does do a nice job. You've then got saturation, which again, I really, I'm like, guys, I use this kind of stuff all the time, and I'm confused. This seems to be like all of these, how much of this is happening. So it seems to be a wet-dry mix. And then if you're at 100% but shape's at 0, then there's no shaping. And then it gets more... whatever that is, it gets more shapery. But again, the RTFM gives us no sense of what that might be. I did find in use I tended to have to, with more complex signals. So yeah, fair enough with very simple signals like this. But wet-dry combination, and I know most people that's what they do all the time. Me, I find that kind of weird, but I just don't feel like I have control here, so I'm sort of being a bit random. And that's just a gain compensation. So we're losing some level here. We can push a bit, so we just look at our own metering. There's no metering on board. I have no problems whatsoever with the concept of this changing levels, because that kind of obsession with levels never changing, just like, yeah, weird. And then we've got a low pass filter, which they call a damper. So just across the board, you can warm up a signal. Obviously useful if we're pushing in quite a bit of and it's nicely set up for that sound. Like the sound that they're aiming to achieve. So as your tone shaper, you can load and save sections of that. You can actually hit the random button and it'll just randomize and give you something odd. You've then got the melt section. Everything is driven by the master here. And then you've got the 3 sections which you can turn on and off. Flow, which is essentially your wow and flutter. And then you can set your level here, which is then controlled by the master level over here. It's logical and it makes perfect sense, but sometimes it just feels a little... But this is the only way to do it with this kind of detail. So we can set a wow, we can set a flutter, they're your rates, and then a mix between these 2 LFOs. So where Mondo Melt really has 1 LFO and some multiplications thereof, these are actually separate LFOs, and then you can mix, so you're only hearing the wow amount, or only the flutter, or a bit of both. There's then the random thing, which is inserting a randomness into the LFO. So that's some really nasty tape there. We've got a few different modes. These were not explained. I'm assuming they simply changed the waveform. So it's probably a sine wave, maybe robotic as a sample and hold, and then a ramp up and a ramp down. You just got to see what works. You can sync to BPM if that's really your cup of meat, go for it. Obviously doesn't represent the real world because wow and flutter don't work to BPM. And then the overall level of that section. You can set dropouts. So set a rate. I don't think I ever understood phase. Maybe that's changing the shape of the form, and then again that randomness. So that's an audio dropout. And having some from column A and some from column B is actually really quite useful. And then this is unique to this one. It's not in the Mondo Melt, is jump. You can set it, but only to BPM. To move. And I'm guessing that that's possibly like where you've got sticky tape, like literally your tape is sticky, and or your belts are sticky or something, and so the drive is sort of snagging and then go whoa to catch up to itself. I plain didn't really get this, but it can create this weird kind of result. So again, if you add in a little bit straight, wonky, and of course we can turn it into a chorus. That's not actually adding a chorus, it's simply taking all the things that you've done and splitting them so that they're like a normal chorus that has a mono or a stereo mode. So one side goes up, the other side goes down. And you can turn your wonkiness into a chorus, a unique chorus. And it's nice. I think it's a really cool feature. While it's not really a normal chorus, it is a cool feature, and I used it all the way through that track, which doesn't have a name at the moment. So that's that really wonky tape thing. It says we can send it to the Echo. I'm really kinda in two minds about how that is working. Then we've got our Echo section. This is largely as you expect. You can set to BPM amounts, you can set them so that they match or don't match. And then you offset by small amounts. And ping pong. Manual mode. Ping pong, not ping pong. Offset. We'll leave it in this mode for the moment. And then kind of like, how do I just do a normal LFO, sir? In theory, that should be doing it, but it's not. It just doesn't seem to be wobbly. So I'm unsure how to do just a normal modulated delay, because that's my go-to in everything in life. But you do have this beat factor thing, which again, I will admit I really don't rightly know. You've got the ability to adjust the time by a certain amount. So you can set it from an eighth of whatever is this to 2 times, and you can move it by hand. That's the manual mode. While in many ways that does represent the turning of the knob or the modification of the thing, which was part of the Dubsan, because they were playing with this, it's not the same as a modulated delay. But to be fair, a lot of those space echoes didn't actually give you a full control. It was a, do you want that time or do you want that time? So it was a clunky switching between the two. And how this is expressed is controlled by the glide knob. So in many ways, this probably does represent a certain thing with regards to how early dub type stuff was done. So moving. I have no idea of the art of how that was done, so I will kind of leave that alone, but it is odd. It's unusual. I'm not going to say it's bad, but I don't know how to use it. However, I guess by bringing in an external modulation source, I could set this to halfway through so I get exactly what this is. And then set an LFO to control this. But that's a lot more work and a little bit of a PITA when this could have it on board and possibly should, but I don't know, it's just how it is. There's also the auto mode, so now it does turn into a kind of LFO. You can hear here it's switching from one to another. We can set this to glide, but it's pretty dramatic. It's more dramatic than is, shall we say, useful. So that's moving at whatever rate we set it. And this uses like a pulse wave, and we can change the balance. But that means that the point at which it changes is once every X, in this case 3 bars. So you hear a long lot of no modulation, and then suddenly, which I don't know, I'm not getting. The closest you can get it really is, I guess you can go 0.75. But it's still larger. It's like, how do we balance that so it doesn't seem as... That's where I get lost. And seeing in theory, oh, maybe this is actually supposed to be the level for that, which is weird. let's go dramatic. Oh no, it's rocky. So no, it's not. I just don't know how to control this in a way to say, yeah, I want to be able to have this subtle like I would a modulated delay. It's interesting. We can input the level to the echo section. They default to, a lot of their patches are about -3. Obviously, that's going to change your mix. I just think, why wouldn't you run it as hot as you can? There is a filter, which is a high pass. And a low pass. It seems to be a post rather than in the middle, but fair enough. We can set it to continue to loop. And mix, which is linear, which means that it will lose level in the middle, or a equal power, which will maintain its level in the middle. You will, however, find that it just feels different, and you'll tend to feel like you're having to find your comfortable balance a lot lower in the throw of the knob. There is no right or wrong. So a lot in the mix, a lot in the mix. Neither right nor wrong. Different devices will be set different ways. I'm just used to linear, but yes, it does have the downside of appearing to lose level in the middle. So then, in the case of bringing them together, straight, wonked. We can mix here, but it automatically becomes a kind of chorus. It's there, it's fine, somebody's going to find use for it. The Mondo knob, as I mentioned earlier, is multiplying everything by X. Might be 10. So it's just going to get more dramatically nasty. You can add some hiss. I wouldn't mind changing the scaling on this knob, because at small amounts it feels like too much, but then tape hiss always feels like too much. It feels very clean and it's coming sort of after the signal. Maybe that is right, that it wouldn't be affecting the... Maybe tape hiss is always after the tape itself. I didn't use it because I found it went straight to too much, and I'm injecting hiss in a couple of other places with other devices, and then just an overall. And I did use this in one point in the mix in the piece, whereas I pointed out in Mondo Melt, this is nice that it goes down to nothing. It all goes to plus 12 dB as well. Again, just a sense of really flat, rigid sound, interesting sound. Bottom line is that it is far more than the Mondo Melt, a very strong player in its intended outcomes, which is to amplify your sounds. The issue that I have is that it's just too much. But again, I've used it to, I think, very nice effect. I was really pleased. I wouldn't have written a piece like the one at the beginning without this. So in that sense, yeah, it's cool. Would I continue to write a whole lot of pieces like that? Well, unless I decided I want an album of pieces like that, no. But I'm not much of a one-trick pony kind of guy myself. I want the one delay that does kind of everything. That's something I really like about Reason's default devices, is that they either already are really versatile, or because of Reason's structure, you can sort of say, okay, well, I want to add that to it, and now I've got my little monster machine that does that thing. But not everybody wants to build it from scratch. I do. If it's something that I'm going to fairly regularly want that thing, I'll either save it off as a combinator. I'm sure you've seen, if you watch my videos regularly, that I've got combinators that do certain things. Or I'll simply go over to SynthEdit and build it myself. But I'm a guy who can do that. So to say that everyone else should do that is unrealistic. However, I will always say, and this is not related to Psychmodulation or this device at all, but I will say I do not have truck with that whole, oh, well, we'll get this device that automatically does it for us because we don't know how to do it and it's too hard to learn. It's like, my answer to that these days is oh, okay, so if one of your loved ones needs surgery, would you go watch easy surgery video and get your rusty spoon out and cure their cancer yourself? Or would you be looking around saying, where's Dr. Sean Murphy? Where's House? So that you could find the best surgeon that you could get your sticky fingers on. I think that's probably what you'd be doing. So why, with your music, if it matters to you, are you cutting corners and going, oh, well, I'll just use this thing that says it's going to make it easy for me because it's too hard for me to learn? Well, either learn, or if it's not in your wheelhouse to learn, like it's not in my wheelhouse to learn to be a rally driver or a surfer or a guitar playing dude, then bring in somebody who is well suited to that, i.e. a mix engineer or a sound designer or something like that. This is one of those ones that it's out there on the the jagged and very drunken edge, and you're going to love it or you're not. I'm impressed. I think it is very cool. I've run into quite a few of these things, and straight away I'm like, no. It's just, they're a piss take, to be blunt. This is so far out over the edge that it creates its own credibility. It creates a difficulty for me to use it as a regular day-to-day device, but it was never meant that way. But again, that could possibly be fixed with making the Mondo have a divide by rather than a multiply function, so that we could just take all of this and tone it back down. I know they say, well, you could tone it down here, but it doesn't control that, and it doesn't control everything. We could do. So bottom line, you really got to try this, and there are demos as far as I'm aware. Try it, see how you go. If it fits with your thing and what you're looking for, I think it actually really is a pretty super sort of a thing because of its commitment to being out over the ragged bleeding edge of normal, sensible, and useful. And as you hear, the A, B, and the piece, once you pull these out, you've got really, really not much going on, and then suddenly you've got this big atmosphere, this feeling piece, and it's not about whether you dig the piece or not. Never ask for ABs or demo work, test work to be taken as, do I think it's cool or not? If you're doing that, then, I don't know, just go watch a video and get your rusty spoon and do your own easy surgery. Just don't come at me when you die with that, or your loved ones die with that. But the AB is really strong. We've got a piece that's really got nothing to say for itself, and then suddenly this atmospheric piece that's like, oh, that's interesting. And that is down to the Echo Melt, which has all this complex, greebly ability to do these things. Hard to control, but that out of control over the ragged bleeding edge seems to be their stock in trade, in which case they're absolutely nailing it. I assume there's anything to put a nail in this scenario. So if it interests you, get out there, try it, create the scenario in which it's going to be useful for you. Again, my advice very much is be finding your sound, not be trying to nail somebody else's sound. I was like, oh, I heard some retro Blaze track that someone said was cool, and I have to be able to do exactly that. That's not how you win with things like this. You get out there and you go, okay, oh, that's me, and you make your thing from that. If you have any questions down below, please note about how the program works or about support, that goes to Psychic Modulation. Read their manual. I really think you should. It may make a little more sense to you than it does to me, but you got to get out there and play with it. But most importantly, get out there, have fun. My name is Benedict, again for Higher Hertz. There is higherhertz.com, different streams of information, different people, different points of view. Get out there, have fun, have a great day.